So I've been wondering, I said, what the hell, when you say to people that there's going to be an economic collapse, and they say, oh, people have been saying that for years. Well, what the hell do you think's been going on for years? Huh? You think there haven't been any collapses? Any market collapses? How about the actual economy? And how about the actual standard of living of Americans? You don't think that's been declining? And I mean, these chicken shit people that have a what do you call it? They have a career. They have a successful career. Huh? They're hustlers. They're successful hustlers, right? Or whatever they got. They say, and then it never occurs to them that, boy, you know, the country's actually getting weaker and poorer, and rich, poorer and poorer. More and more people are getting on government stuff, and they pay for it with deficits. Or I guess deficits don't matter, huh? That's what the Keynesians say. Deficits don't matter. So the reality is the same thing. What do you think is the cause of the fact that the middle class is shrinking, the poor class is growing, and more people are getting on government subsidies, like student loans and what do you call it, food stamps, and whatever else they get, grants and stuff. I don't know, I guess massive, all the medical stuff. See, that's been socialized for the last 60, 70 years. They've been fixing the prices, they've been controlling the doctors, they've been destroying the doctor-patient relationship, which should be private and voluntary. It's not voluntary anymore. And what do you think causes? What do you think? Here's another question. Here's a fundamental question. What is the economic function of interest rates? You don't answer those questions. You just continue with your stupid career and your stupid attitude towards people who say there's going to be a collapse. It's stupid because we've had collapses. We've had dozens of them in the last 100 years. And then you say, well, they've been saying that for years. And also you've seen people get poorer. If it wasn't for the cause of these shrinking middle class and shrinking growth patterns, even the growth that we've had in the 20th century was actually, I mean, here it is, the 21st century. We've got all the technology that we have. And yet we know that the income didn't increase in the last 20 years. That's a fact. The real income did not increase. Now, who tells you all these facts? And that's the left wing. But the stupid the stupid conservatives and the stupid Trump people are owning this fake economy. So I said fake economy. So that's the answer to the question. What's the function of interest rates? Why is the middle class shrinking? Why has the income of Americans stagnated in the last so many years, this last 20 years? The answer is the same as cheap money caused by central banking, the Federal Reserve. That's the answer. And why is that the answer? That's the other question. Why is that the answer? Why do we know that central banks creating cheap money? Well, because the function of interest rates is to coordinate the present with the future based on savings. That's the function of central bank, of money, of interest rates, of the price of money. Interest rates are the price of money, to coordinate the present with the future. And yet you get these half-assed educated people that have a knack for making a couple of bucks here and there. Just a minute, this guy's going to pass by. It's colder than hell out there. So he's got these half-assed educated people. I mean, really piss-poor educated people. That's what I'm surrounded by here. Even the professors are piss-poor educated. I'm going to say that right up front. They don't know anything about the way the world works. Okay, and they say they don't ask the question: what causes booms and busts? Is it a natural phenomenon? Is it caused by greed? Is it caused by subsidies to the rich? Is it caused by deregulation? Is it caused by lack of government planning? These kinds of things? Well, no, it's not. And in general, it's not, because government is force, and force never contributes anything to society on net, only in gross, but not on net. And so, what is specifically going on is that we don't have deregulation, we have increase in regulation. Trump decreased some regulations, but it's nothing compared. I mean, Trump is taking this and the conservatives at CPAC, he just saw the conservatives at CPAC. And the conservatives and Republicans who get behind Trump, or don't get behind Trump, are committing suicide. They're committing political suicide. I got this idea from Peter Schiff, and I've been doubting it because, there might be somebody like this guy that owns the coffee store, what do you call that coffee thing? Starbucks. He may be the next president, but the logic is that the Republicans are owning this fake economy, this boom economy that we have. It's just as fake as the economy under Obama or Bush or Clinton or Bush 2, Bush 1. Or, under Reagan, wasn't as fake. It was somewhat fake, but not totally. I don't want to talk about those details, but it was halfway there. So you cannot destroy the relationship between savings and investment by cheap money, by having artificial low interest rates, which is what central banks do. And the reason they do it is because of cronyism between the central banks, regardless of whether they're, as the right-wing populists stupidly think, that central banking should be a government function, regardless of whether it's a private or a government function. Makes no difference. They're going to still be in bed with special interests who love cheap money. Politicians and special interests, vested interests, love cheap money because they don't have to take the brunt of the damage that it does to the economy. They actually get the benefits. And this is a distinction that the stupid people on the left don't make between crony capitalist billionaires and real billionaires who actually voluntarily gained their money because they supplied something to somebody that millions of people wanted. So the question that these my friends have, who keep saying that cheap money is who have this hustle going on all the time. See, they got this job or this technology, this profession going on all the time. And it's a hustle. It's a position that they gain by becoming technicians or skilled people or by having a knack for business. They have no intelligence given over to actually how the world works. And the way the world works is through voluntarism. And central banking has nothing to do with voluntarism. And the critical means by which it destroys an economy is to separate the present from the future by destroying the incentive to save, which is the foundation of the economy, with the incentive to invest for a consumer economy. Because when you're not saving, you're consuming. If the value of the currency is declining, then you consume, you don't save. Or you put your money in the stock market and you create a bubble there. And the stupid Republicans got themselves attached to that, like the Fox News people, who are the most the most sycophant bunch of jerks I've ever seen. They say that Lou Dobbs keeps saying, this is the greatest economy. And even Kennedy, who's a libertarian, kind of echoes that a little bit. It's not a great economy, it's a fake economy. And it's going to destroy the country. Just as the bubbles broke and just as the middle class is shrinking. And this is the hypocrisy. This is the low energy people who run around here that say, oh, people have been saying this is going to happen forever. It has been happening forever. It just hasn't. It's just that the bubble has been reinflated several times, 4 or 5 times since the 80s. Since the 80s, it was only. I'm recording. Beat it. I'm recording. Since the 80s, this bubble economy has been reinflated 3 or 4 times after it popped, and this bubble economy is where the vested interests make their money, while the middle class and the poor become screwed, and more people become poor and more dependent on the credit economy, this shrinking credit economy. And the only reason it works is because the world has been propping up the currency by buying the currency. Because we don't have free markets in the world. We have central banking in the world that has this stupid idea that they want to maintain the markets that they have in the U.S., the consumer markets, rather than having natural growth of business and a natural growth in natural money, a commodity money, which is something we haven't had since 71, and we haven't had fully since 33 or 1860, depending on how independent. I mean, even in the 1850s and 40s, there was still some finagling going on with the state governments in terms of money supply. But, I mean, they weren't creating money themselves, but they were allowing banks to cheat on their requirement to pay back their notes in gold and silver, which that's what nails it down. That's what nails down inflation. The fact that it's a real thing that you have to redeem, that keeps it from going to hell, keeps the money supply from expanding and creating these false bubbles. And by the way, in the 19th century, before the Fed, the bubbles were tiny. And many of them were caused by central banking. The one of 1819, the one of 36. There was one in 56 that was caused by, I don't know what. But then there was one that was caused by the Civil War expansion. I'm recording. Civil War expansion, was the one of, it was called 1873. There's another one in 1894, when just about the time that Grover Cleveland got elected, who was actually a libertarian. He had not been president before that, the previous 4 years. So all those bubbles recovered quickly, and nobody interfered with the collapses of the bubbles until 1929, when Hoover interfered with it. Another myth created by the establishment propaganda that Hoover didn't interfere. And of course, he interfered hugely. And he did exactly what everybody's done since then, except everybody else has done it on an exponentially greater level, including even Roosevelt complained about Hoover's socialism and his debt creation. And that's what they ran against him on, because in those days, the Democrats had not become the Socialist Party. They were still the Libertarian, half-assed. They stopped becoming in 1896, the Libertarian Party. That's what Grover Cleveland was. I guess he was elected in 92. 1892. And then in 1896, that's when McKinley got elected as a Republican, because the Democrats lost their base, their principles of libertarianism, their Thomas Jeffersonian principles. So all this, I'm mentioning all this to let you know what the history was of economics, of banking, of how the government had the comparative differences of interference in government, in the expansion of the money supply and in interference with free markets was far, far less as you go back in time. And then you know, and even 200 years ago, people understood the evils of inflation. So the markets. So the markets collapse, so the economy becomes weaker, so wages drop because of that discoordination between the present and the future, because that there is a false interest rates created by the central banks. So that's the answer. But why is it that my colleagues do not ask the question? Because they're low energy type people. That's why. And they have their knacks, they have their ability to make a few bucks here. But then the whole thing's going to collapse. The real estate guys are going to lose their money. The stock guys are going to lose their money. All of it. They're going to lose massive amounts of wealth. 70, 80, 90% of their wealth. Because their purchasing power is going to drop that much, and if not 100%, you know. So, and that's happened before, and yet, what do they think? Because we have a better world, we have better technology, maybe because we have Vedic technology, and yet the Vedic technology is not being applied, right? And that's an inside point that not all of you need to know. I mean, I'd like you all to know it, but it's not necessary. It's just an inside reference. So okay. So here we are. We don't have that much intelligence because we don't have that much energy. We're focused on what we have as what we were born with, our skills and abilities, and yet we ignore the actual laws of economics because the government trained us to be that way. Because the government doesn't understand that it's self-destructive. Because the government itself is going to be. I expect when the collapse comes, there could be massive suicides amongst the people who lose their livelihoods and don't have no idea how to protect themselves. That's what's going to happen. It happened in 29. It wasn't too bad. I mean, it was in the news. It's in the history books that way. And of course, the history books blame it on capitalism. Of course, we didn't have capitalism except in decreasing amounts over the decades since the country began. The best time is between 1835 and 1860. That was the most freest markets we had. And quite a lot maybe before that, even during the time of the central banking. And of course, there was a lot of freedom after the Civil War. After 1879, we went back on the gold standard. But there was a lot of cronyism going on with the railroads, just as there was with the steamships before that. And there was Interstate Commerce Commission, fixed prices up, not just down, but fixed them up. So that the railroads wanted that. They wanted large corporations and large corporations love regulation because the little guys can't compete. As little guys around this town know. They know how tough regulation is. So don't give me this crap about it's always happened. People have been talking about this collapse for a long time and it doesn't happen. It has happened. It just hasn't happened in the big way. It's going to kill your ass because you're so stupid to listen to me.